toll incentive, EVTI scheme.
Thank you.
The Deputy has 4 minutes to make an initial statement.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. Minister, new figures show that electric vehicle registrations increased significantly in January, with a total of 811 cars sold, a massive increase of 680% on January 2018. A huge increase, I think you'll agree. The Society of the Irish Motor Industry, or SIMI as we know it, said the January figure is more than for the whole of 2017, and in fact is over 60% of the total for the whole of last year, 2018. It's quite clear that this sector is growing, not only internationally, but domestically. It's equally quite clear that in terms of personal vehicle usage, electric vehicles are the way of the future. I think the Minister and indeed the House would agree with that statement. However, it's equally clear that, based on recent reports and discussions I've had with people, that there is some concern around some of the incentives that are being put in place. For instance, the tolling discounts which were put in place in order to incentivise the uptake of electric vehicles have led to some confusion among existing owners of electric vehicles, and indeed there's a complete lack of knowledge, it seems, among prospective purchasers of electric vehicles. So my question to the Minister for prospective purchasers is, how exactly is this scheme being advertised? A journalist from the Irish Times contacted Transport Infrastructure Ireland to get some clarity around how the scheme operates, only to be given incorrect information. And while that in itself is acceptable, of course, people make mistakes and we can't necessarily hold one individual to blame, it does go to show that there is a lack of clarity and a lack of consistency around the application of this scheme. If I may read from the story written by one Neil Briscoe, where he says the issue, possibly worryingly, seems to be that there is confusion in the ranks over exactly how the discount system should work. A representative of the TII told the newspaper, the Irish Times, that please note that if people were travelling during peak hours, there would be no discount. That, however, according to the journalist and indeed the regulations, is incorrect. According to the department's own official rules on the scheme, on your website, which says that at peak times the discount is reduced from 75% to 50% on the M50, and from 50% to 25% for petrol hybrid electric vehicles at peak times. So consequently, there is a discount at peak times, yet the TII say otherwise. And I suppose the question is, if TII don't know how this operates, how on earth could the public know how this operates? Is this issue recognised within your department? Is there a plan within your department to either expand this scheme or clarify this scheme? Like I said at the outset, it's quite clear that this is the way of the future. It's quite clear that the number of users using this is only going to go up and up. So I think some clarity and some consistency on this matter would be most welcome. I've spoken to a number of people within the community, and by and large, Minister, the good news is that the majority, the vast majority, in fact, of over 150 people polled on this, 60% of them are happy with the scheme. They use the scheme. However, there is a significant minority who are confused by the inconsistencies of the scheme. Currently, there are 5 different toll tag operators who apply the discounts. Some apply them in a live manner, as and when you go through the tolls. Some apply them in a backlogged manner, often rebating monthly based on arrears accrued. So it's clear that among the toll tag operators and between the TII and the department, there's a complete lack of clarity and a complete lack of consistency in this regard. So I'd appreciate to hear about your own feelings on this, the plans for this scheme for the future, and indeed your own feelings about electric vehicles in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy. And Tara.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Deputy, and thank you for bringing this matter to my attention. And I'm glad that the Deputy acknowledges the great success of EVs in general, even though he has specific criticisms which are interesting to hear about the way it's operating. I'd like to give some background on the issue for the benefit of the House. It was developed through the Low Emission Vehicle Task Force, an interdepartmental group which aims to accelerate the take-up of low-carbon technologies in the road transport sector, and forms part of a wider suite of incentives aimed at supporting the national transition towards lower-emitting vehicles. The reduced tolling regime was introduced to encourage private car commuters who regularly use tolled roads to consider switching to electric vehicles. It is estimated that there are approximately 400,000 heavy toll users in Ireland, and so reduced tolls acts as a meaningful incentive for a large number of vehicle owners. I was happy to announce the launch of the scheme in July 2018, which is administered by TII on behalf of my department. Under the scheme, battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles qualify for 50% and 25% toll reduction, respectively, up to a maximum annual threshold of €500 for private vehicles and €1,000 for commercial vehicles. Greater off-peak reductions also apply to the M50 toll. I would like to inform the Deputy that information for electric vehicle owners on the simple and straightforward registration process is available online through the Transport Infrastructure Ireland website and at etoll.ie. Vehicles participating in the scheme must be registered and approved by one of 4 toll service providers. All eligible vehicles require a toll tag to avail of the scheme. Since its introduction, the EV toll scheme has proven very successful, with over 52% of all electric vehicles in the national fleet registered to avail the incentive. That's over 4,000 successful registrations. Based on the significant increase in EV sales in 2019, I expect the numbers availing of the incentive to rise further. I am aware of the media article to which the Deputy referred and to the concerns regarding the operation of the scheme. As advised in my recent response to a parliamentary question from Deputy Imelda Munster on Tuesday last, I understand that to date neither TII nor the individual toll service providers who operate the scheme have received any information, concerns or complaints from customers regarding the operation of the scheme. I would like to take this opportunity to state that if any electric vehicle owner is having issues registering for the scheme, I would encourage them to contact TII directly, and the matter will be investigated as a matter of urgency. Maintaining the success of the scheme is important as we continue to encourage more and more people to switch to electric vehicles. As such, TII has already begun a review of the scheme. The electric vehicle customer experience will, of course, form an integral part of this review process. The transition to EVs is fundamental to decarbonising the private car fleet. As such, a generous range of incentives have been put in place to encourage their uptake. Incentives include purchase grants, VRT relief, favourable BIK rates, low motor tax, and an extensive public charging network. I'm pleased to see the positive impact that such incentives are having on uptake rates. We're beginning to see a marked increase in electric vehicle sales, to which the Deputy referred. In January alone, this year, 811 new full battery electric vehicles were registered. This compares to 104 vehicles for the same period last year. Similarly, plug-in hybrid sales are increasing, with 301 new vehicles sold in January compared to 109 last year. Electric vehicles accounted for over 3.4% of all new car sales to date in 2019. This upward trend is one I hope to see continue as EVs become a common alternative to conventionally fuelled cars. In the short term, incentives, including the reduced tolling regime we are speaking of today, play a vital role in guiding consumer choice towards lower emitting alternatives, which is a necessary step change as we move towards decarbonising the transport sector.
Thank you, Minister. Capta.
Minister, thank you for your answer. One bit that would jump out at me from the answer would be where you say that since its introduction, the electric vehicle toll scheme has proven very successful, there are your words, with over 52% of all electric vehicles in the national fleet registered to avail of the incentive. This is free money. This is an incentive. Yet only 52% of these people who are early converters, generally speaking, quite well connected in a small, tight-knit community, only 52% of them have registered. Only 1 in 2 of them have registered, of them. Yet it's meant to be an incentive scheme for people to convert to electric vehicles. It's meant to be an incentive scheme for the public at large to convert to electric vehicles. A scheme to turn doubters into believers, so to speak. A scheme to get more people buying electric vehicles. And yet, of the existing owners of electric vehicles, only half have converted. Does this not indicate, as outlined in my original statement, that there's a clear issue with clarity of the scheme, with the consistency of the applicability of the scheme, with the effectiveness of the scheme, and with the usefulness of the scheme? It seems to me as though it's garnering an expense, potentially quite a large expense, and yet isn't actually doing what it sets out to do. People are converting to electric vehicles in greater numbers, but as outlined at the end of your own answer, there are a number of challenges facing us, particularly in terms of charging infrastructure. And I suppose my question to the Minister is, does he feel as though this scheme right now, where only 1 in 2 of existing vehicle owners is actually operating as a true incentive scheme?
Okay. I'd like to thank the Deputy for asking that question a second time. If I didn't adequately respond to it the first time, I will both repeat myself and add a bit. I don't know the answer to your question, and no do you, of course, otherwise you wouldn't be asking it. But I would say to you that it's possible that it's not being properly promoted. It's possible, but it could also be inertia. I don't know. But you start off by saying that it's not working properly and reading from an article in the Irish Times. But what you seem to disregard, Deputy, is that so they received absolutely no complaints. Now, isn't it very strange that the scheme is operating so well that they've had no complaints at all from TII? To date, neither TII nor the individual toll service providers who operate the scheme have received any information, concerns or complaints from customers regarding the operation of the scheme. If they're 48% of the people who qualify not actually applying for it, it could be inertia, or it could be a matter of it not being properly advertised. And in order to meet the Deputy, the possibility the Deputy is right, I will convey the remarks that he's made to the TII.